Hey, everybody. Good morning. It is Resistance Live for the 10th of March, 2020. Nice to see you all. It is raining here in California, which actually is kind of a good thing. It's never a bad thing to have rain in California, but it somehow feels like we all needed a little rain today. Lots to talk about today. Just want to say first and foremost that for everybody who's feeling kind of afraid and nervous about where we are, I understand that. And I want to make sure that, we all have a conversation toward the end of the broadcast about coping and community and all that sort of stuff, because I'm hearing from everybody, including here in my local community, just that there's a lot of concern and fear. Last night in Long Beach, there was an announcement, which is not all that far from where I live, that there were 3 confirmed cases now in Long Beach. And, we're now at a point where, the numbers are going to kind of skyrocket by any other prediction, over the next few days. So, I want to make sure that we're sort of like caring for one another as a community in addition to everything else. And I want to send lots of love to those of you who are particularly concerned about aging parents and grandparents and the like. We're certainly dealing with that here. So let's just talk about what's just happened, because there was literally just about 15 minutes ago a news conference out of the White House again with the president and Vice President Pence. There was a little bit of good news that came out of that, which is that Pence has apparently convinced all of the insurance companies now to cover coronavirus testing regardless, and also to cover coronavirus treatment without any cost to the insureds. Now, that is not necessarily the best that we could hope for. And I want to make this really clear, because it's only for people who are already insured, right? We still have this massive gap of uninsured people in this country. There's still an awful lot of concern about what's going to happen for, once again, the poorest parts of our nation, the poorest people in our nation, in the event that there is illness. I think that it's a step in the right direction. I will say that I continue to find it just appalling how everybody has to bow down and kiss Trump's shoes every time there's a step in what should already be happening on this front. But at the bare minimum, that's helpful, because apart from anything else, there have already been some horror stories, as we all know, about testing, costing people $3,000 a pop. Well, now at least if you have insurance, it's going to be free. I'll just say I'm grateful for Obamacare, because that's how I insure my family. And so, if you are insured through Obamacare, it sounds as though all of that will be covered as well. But again, we're still in a situation where the most vulnerable people in our country are at risk of not seeking testing or treatment if they are not insured. And that, again, is a massive problem. We've had a huge number of cancellations in the last couple of days. Yesterday in particular was sort of a watershed moment, because not only did Ireland cancel all of their St. Patrick's Day parades, we also had Coachella canceled, which is a huge deal here in California. We've had, the St. Patrick's Day parade in New York City shut down. There's a whole series of, again, very big public events that are being canceled, conferences, South by Southwest. And I'm expecting we're going to see more of that. One of the things that appears to be very clear out of China, given where we are right now, and by the way, President Xi is actually traveling to Wuhan now, which is a sign that apparently everyone is taking this as tea leaf reading, that China believes that the virus may have peaked in Wuhan. And again, the data that's coming out of this is going to be very relevant for the way that the rest of us deal with this. But nonetheless, the expectations here is that more containment is going to be necessary. Again, I would just want to remind you all that obviously, to the extent that you can prepare for what is likely coming here, Harvard announced today that they've given students 5 days to vacate as if they're leaving for summer vacation. Amherst did the same thing yesterday. The expectation that schools are going to shut down for a chunk of time is very realistic. Once again, I'm going to just encourage everyone who can to please prepare for the possibility of being more or less homebound for a couple of weeks. If you have young children, that obviously is going to impact your capacity to work. let me just say a couple of things about that because I was asked about this explicitly. Um, I have been pushing very hard for kind of local community engagement on this issue as well as many others, frankly, for the last 6 months or so. One of the things that's going to need to happen here is that parents and caregivers are going to have to bind together to try to get through this for the sake of allowing people to still work and make money to the extent that they can. A lot of businesses, by the way, at this point, assuming that you are not in a business where you have to be on site, are encouraging everyone to work from home as much as possible. I think that we're going to need to be collaborative in the way that we think about childcare in particular over the next few weeks. I certainly am thinking about the caregivers at the aftercare program at my children's school who work by the hour, who are going to need money if in the event that the school shuts down, and what that will look like in a way that can be built collaboratively so that, hopefully they can make some money, and also so that children in our neighborhood can get the care that they need. And, again, this is one of the things I just want to say this, like, women tend to be really good at this, right? Like those of us who have kids or have, been engaged in some form of like community childcare management. We need to collectively get together and work on how we're going to manage this in our own local communities. And I would really encourage you to think through the resources that are already available to you. Teachers in the event that school shuts down. Obviously, childcare providers, if their location shuts down. There's going to be a need on every side for people to work collaboratively here together. And I think, we all need to just get creative about how we manage that. And this may come down to, you watch your neighbor's kids for half a day with your kids and vice versa. Again, creative strategies are going to be really necessary here, and start thinking about it now. We're on the edge of these things starting to happen, and we're very much going to have to, progress forward in creative and novel ways. It's that old saying, it takes a village, and we're going to need the village now more than ever. We had some questions about how Trump's base is likely to respond to this. So, one of the things that I just want to point out here, and I'm seeing some comments for those of you who are experiencing this as well, is that Fox News, in its ultimate propaganda, has spun this as the politicization of this virus by the Democrats. One of the things that means is that even though now we have multiple conservative members of Congress quarantining themselves after being exposed at CPAC, as we've discussed, there is still a huge swath of the community that thinks the whole thing is fabricated or not nearly as big a deal as it should be. One of the things that concerns me about that, of course, is that, community transmission is community transmission. And if you've been exposed to it, you really do need to stay home for 14 days. The danger of this spreading rapidly and particularly infecting people who are vulnerable is dependent on all of us following that type of protocol. I'll say this, Hillary Clinton's been tweeting about this morning. One of the things that she pointed out is that part of being good community citizens right now is all of us choosing to engage in ways that protect all of us and not just some of us, and that we put the needs of the community in front of our own individual needs in the event that we're exposed. That is all very rational and smart advice. And again, one of the things that disturbs me about this is we already have cases of people breaking quarantine in very selfish ways. There's a story out of St. Louis where the family of someone who was exposed did not maintain their quarantine. They went out to dinner. The mom went out and got her nails done. They attended an event. These are the kinds of things that we all are going to have to avoid doing in the event that we have been exposed or we believe we may have been exposed. And from the standpoint of our commonality and our community, that's what we have to encourage everyone else to do. There's going to come a point where people realize how serious this is, even on the far right end of things. Once family members end up getting infected, people end up in hospitals, God forbid our medical system gets overwhelmed, it's going to be an unavoidable conclusion. Now, do I think that that's not going to impact Trump? Well, it might impact some of his base, but as we've discussed, for the last 3.5 years on this broadcast, there is a component of our culture that is particularly vulnerable to autocratic personalities. The studies show it's about 20 to 25%. There is nothing that the president is going to do that is going to sway those people away from him. Do I think there's going to be a particular crisis at a certain point here that is going to force certain folks to call into question? Maybe it'll be the far right intelligentsia to call into question the president's leadership. Yes, absolutely. Do I think that there's elements of his base that will not abandon him no matter what? That's obviously proven up by the facts. So I don't think that we should be honestly worrying about his base at this point. I think part of what we need to be doing is actually reinforcing the need to abide by protocols with everyone we come across. And if you are laughed at in the response of trying to do that, my recommendation is to say, do you realize that people over 70 are particularly vulnerable and that the death rate skyrockets when people over that age are exposed? How are you going to feel if you're a part of infecting people in your own community who then pass away from this virus because you didn't abide by the recommendations of the CDC or the local government? Those are legit questions. And if people are that amoral, there's not much we're going to be able to do about it. But we do have to, at this point, at least amongst ourselves, agree that we're going to put communal well-being first and our own needs second. And that doesn't mean you don't go out and feed your children, but it does mean that if you think you've been exposed, you stay home. It also means, and I think this is a wildly wonderful recommendation, by the way, that if you have elderly people in your community who are concerned about being exposed to the virus, you offer to do things like do their shopping for them or help them to do their shopping online. There's already efforts being made on this front amongst friends of mine in New York City to come together in their local communities and make sure that elderly people don't have to go out into places where there could be community exposure, and that there's work being done by those of us who are healthier to try to support people who maybe are a little bit more vulnerable in that regard. Again, this is a moment to apply your best creative thinking about how the community can support one another while also abiding by these protocols. So really critical, again, to be very creative here in this context. Okay, we've had some questions about infrastructure in light of the coronavirus. So, I want to point out a couple of other things here. Elizabeth Warren is calling for inquiries about how the coronavirus is going to be handled in prisons. We've had the governor of New York this morning making sanitary hand washing mandatory in New York State prisons. There is a grave concern right now about what is going to happen in close-quartered environments. By the way, if you are not worried about what's going to happen in human detention camps for migrants right now, you should be, because we've already seen what has happened there in terms of a blatant disregard of the humanity of people who are being held in those camps. God forbid someone gets the coronavirus in an environment where they've got 40 or 50 people packed in a freezer box room at 55 degrees. It's going to be a disaster of epic proportions on top of what are already mass human rights violations. We have to start also pushing our legislators, both local, by the way. This is a good moment to call your governor and ask what your governor is planning to do to respond, to protect populations that are vulnerable in communal environments. That, by the way, this is the other thing I just want to say about this. While South by Southwest being canceled obviously has a massive impact on the economy of Austin, there are other ways in which people are coming together to try to support the artists who otherwise are being impacted. So canceling in-person events or finding ways to strategically manage the spread of the virus on a community basis doesn't mean that we can't also do other creative things that may help to offset that in the event that they're commercial events. Nonetheless, it's really important, really important that the governors of the states, the state where we live, starts to take action that parallels what Governor Cuomo has done. And that's a really, make those phone calls today. We haven't done a lot of call your governor here. I think it's a good day to start doing that, and also to call your local legislators and ask what's their planned response when an outbreak comes to your community, because at this point it's pretty inevitable that all of us are going to be impacted by this locally. So that's a good place to start. And, the infrastructure here. So I'm trying to avoid at this moment, I'll just be really candid with you all, putting things out there that are likely to make people panic. There's a lot of information coming out of Italy right now that is very frightening about what is happening in the Italian medical system, with it being overwhelmed, beds running out, surgical equipment running out, necessary facilities being overwhelmed, intubation not being possible for people who are in near respiratory failure. We also need to discuss with our local folks what the plans are for how to deal with that in the event that the medical system starts to become really overwhelmed. It is absolutely critical at this point, by the way, and I just want to say this, that if you are moderately ill, like the kind of ill that can be treated with cough medicine and fever medication, that you think about containing yourself at home and not seeking medical care unless it gets worse. Because one of the things that people are very concerned about right now is the system being overwhelmed and not able to treat the most direly ill patients. Now, does that mean if you're having trouble breathing, you stay at home? No, absolutely it doesn't. It does mean, though, if you've got like a mild to moderate fever, that at least these are the recommendations that are coming around right now, for instance, you try to self-treat that instead of overwhelming your local medical system. I really don't want to share the stuff coming out of Italy. Like you all know, those of you who have followed since Lights for Liberty know that I'm very in touch with the people from Democrats Abroad. There are some threads being shared by the people who are in Italy in Democrats Abroad that are just really frightening. And I personally would rather see us be proactive here in the context of how we're going to manage all of this from an individual and a local community standpoint, so that we don't end up in circumstances where literally people are dying on hospital room floors without any bed and without any medical intervention, and in some cases without oxygen. We just don't want that to happen. So let's just keep pushing forward toward community management and managing amongst ourselves, and that in process is the next best thing that we can do. Is preparation. Frankly, we have to prepare. Okay, a couple things I just want to mention here from the standpoint of the election. So there's a propagandist talking point that's circulating around right now about Biden's mental health. I just want you all to be aware that when Jill Stein is tweeting about it, or you see the Republicans tweeting about it, that is a Russian propaganda talking point and should be avoided, okay? We all know that Biden has had some gaffes. There's far less evidence, and in fact, there's really no evidence that he's in mental decline, let alone compared to this president. So I want everyone to be very mindful, once again, that if you are sharing propagandist talking points, you're undermining the security of our national election. That feels very important to shout out this morning. I also want to just mention, there's been a couple of questions about why Tulsi is still in the race. I don't have an answer to that question. I think that we've all had a lot of suspicions about her role and her positions. And, if you need any evidence of why she's not a viable candidate, she voted present during the impeachment vote. I don't have an answer to that. And, when each candidate pulls their candidacy from the presidential election is up to them. So I think that the only thing I will say is that Jill Stein's reemergence gives me a serious bit of pause. We knew that when the field got narrower like this, there was going to be quite a bit of disinformation campaigns ramping up from the Russian side of things. Let's please just be mindful about making sure that, to the extent that you are focused on the primary right now, and of course we have primary votes coming up, like people need to get out and vote today and this week. Please make sure that you are focused on the issues and on the candidates and on legitimate news, and not on things like this. So very important to just, again, be very narrow in your focus right now. And, I'll just say this, there's a lot of people who have a lot of criticisms of both candidates on both sides right now. I'm also really mindful of the fact that things are getting misrepresented nonstop. So, there was a series of tweets last night about this interview that Biden gave that claimed that Biden had said that he would veto any Medicare for All bill. If you go watch the footage of that, it's actually a much more nuanced conversation than what was immediately leapt upon in that regard. I'll also just add that we really do have to be, at this point, doing our own research about the policy positions of every candidate. And mindful as well that, to the extent that the Democratic Party is being pushed further and further left, some of what may happen in the event that someone gets into office, it may be very different from where they stand right now. So again, I'm not endorsing anybody else right now. I just can't, I'm focused on other things. And at this moment in time, I'm particularly focused on local and down ballot races. And this is going to shake out how it shakes out. And as I said yesterday, it may shake out in short order, very much in the direction of one candidate above another. I think in the next 10 days, honestly, this whole thing is going to be wrapped up. But I right now am far more focused on the immediate response to what's happening from the standpoint of the coronavirus and everything else that kind of needs to happen in the interim, and helping to support this community and my community locally and my children and everything else that, we all need to be doing right now. They're going to keep campaigning, and we'll see what happens next. Okay, so final things that I just want to say about this from the standpoint of fear. So, I feel like I've been saying for the last week that it's really important not to panic, and it is really important not to panic. There's nothing good is going to be served by, mass overreaction here. And at the same time, we all need to be prepared and very rational for what's coming next. I think part of what's happening right now from the standpoint of panic has to do with the fact that there is no leadership at the top of this country, notwithstanding the fact that I do, at least at the moment, think that the CDC officials are doing their very best to get truthful information out to the public. The Trump administration is failing miserably at this, and everybody knows it. And, just this morning, Trump's tweeting about the wall when there are, 700 confirmed cases of coronavirus in the US and 7 confirmed cases in Mexico. This kind of bullshit is going to keep going on. And our obligation, again, is to prepare, follow the instructions of local officials, follow the scientists, follow the doctors, do the things that are being recommended for each of us that are rational, and kind of ignore the noise. I think that we're far better off at this point doing that and being rational and grounded and preparing ourselves for what's coming next, and making wise choices. This is the other thing I will just say right now. The incubation period for this virus is 14 days. Maybe a little bit more than that in terms of some of the studies that are being demonstrated right now. We have literally no idea at this point how many people have been exposed to the virus. For instance, the first diagnosed case in Westchester, New York, is now linked to somewhere in the range of about 80 people who have since tested positive. And, this is one of the things that we have to consider here is, do you need to be traveling right now? Do you need to be out in the world in group environments? One of the things that even from where we stand right now in terms of rational preparation that makes some sense is to not be doing that if you don't need to, because who knows, right? And I know that that's not easy for all of us. And I certainly know that that's not easy for people who are in service industries who have to be front and center. I'll just let you all know that I had the internet installed in my new house because I'm moving a week from today. I had the internet installed in my new house yesterday, and I had a long conversation with the cable installer just about what Cox Communications is doing to try to limit exposure for their techs who have to be on site with multiple people, multiple families every day, from the standpoint of Corona. So, these are tough and tricky circumstances, and being rational and calm about it while also not doing things that don't make sense from the standpoint of the advice that we're being given by doctors and scientists and your local authorities is really where we need to be right now. And I will just let you all know that I am also really at this point being very mindful about doing the things that need to be done to kind of calm ourselves down. Central nervous system work, meditation practices. I've talked to like 3 friends in the last few days who are going back on anti-anxiety medication right now because these times are really tough. So please, make sure you're taking care of yourselves. Make sure you're doing what you need to do to cope. Those strategies are good, not just for you. They're also good for your immunity. They're good for the community. They're good for your ability to respond and be present in real time to people that you love and care about. So all of this matters quite a bit. All right. So last thing I'm just going to mention on that front, we made an executive decision in the last few days that we're going to run our Haven program again in April. Many of you will remember that we designed this program back in the fall to kind of give our activist leader folks 30 days of calm while continuing to do their work. Well, the good news about Haven is that you can take it from anywhere. And I myself had a moment where I thought, I would actually, if I'm going to be quarantined with my children, I actually would very much like to have 30 days where I can do a meditation prompt every day or a journaling exercise every day, and to be able to provide that to the community in here and the community of followers we have now in a way that makes sense. So Haven is open now. Thanks, Doreen. That's a really nice comment. People who have been through this before will tell you, as Doreen is putting in here, that it's a really nice break and breather. It's very reasonably priced. There's 2 separate tiers. There's payment plans, you can do 2 payments of $59 for the lowest level. And, we're going to have a Facebook group for that. That will be community curated. You're going to get prompts every day for 30 days. And, really these practices are just like 5 minutes a pop that will allow you to kind of create space and breathe and focus on one aspect of life and spirituality and health and wellness and all of that sort of stuff while you're going about your day. So it feels like the right moment for us to do that. And, I'll just add that for me, The real key right now has been creating breathing room where I'm not tapped in all the time, where I'm not allowing myself to be jacked, panicked by the news, where, you know, we're present to what's happening in reality, but at the same time, we're also not engaging in the sort of like, oh my God, right? And there will be time for the oh my God when we hit that point for each of us on a community level, if we need to do that. But even still, you're going to have to respond. So the best thing right now is for us to stay grounded. And one of the things that we're trying to do to serve here is to move toward the right thing. And that means grounded, rational, responsive, prepared, engaged, caring about our communities, caring about one another, and not so far off the rails emotionally based on the fact that we have no leadership at the top of this country that we're not able to function. So we're going to do our part in all of that. I want to encourage all of you, by the way, to the extent that you are able to serve in some way, to do that as well. You know, there's lots of really good suggestions that have been thrown around things like, you know, making sure that you're you know, supporting people who are homebound and the like, that we've already talked about on this broadcast and that I've talked about a lot on Twitter in the last couple of days. School systems are going to need to come together to do free lunches to kids who rely on that sort of thing. I know Governor Newsom here has guaranteed that all the kids who get free lunch are still going to get free lunches here in California, which is amazing. But we all need to be able to be present and functional in order to get through this together as local communities, as statewide, as a nation, and as a planet. So really want to just make sure that that we're all staying grounded. So that's that. If you're interested in learning more about Haven, it's GaiaLeadershipProject.com/Haven. We opened registration this morning. I'm excited to see how many of you choose to participate in that. And we're going to offer some scholarships as we always do. You know, much love. That's it. We're gonna keep going, and I'm gonna be here every day, of course. And I just want to say one other thing. You know, while I get snarky about the people who comment about my hair or comment about my makeup or say that I say too much on the broadcast and the like, I also see all of you who are expressing thanks for me and for our team, for keeping you grounded, for keeping you informed. You know, every time somebody tweets at me that you're grateful for who I am and that I've been here for the last 3.5 years, I do see that, and I just want to say thank you to all of you as well. You know, we're here to serve. We want to continue to serve, and we're very, very grateful for those of you who are present. So much love to all of you. All right, and I will talk to all of you tomorrow, regular time. All right, bye.